guys? Welcome to another episode of On Social, the show that talks about everything that has to do with live video on social media, whether it be Facebook, LinkedIn, all those other good places. But it also talks about how to market your video and how to make your videos better, whether it's live, whether it's recorded, those types of things. So we're really excited. We got a great show for you here today. And joining me, as always, better late than never, the man with the leaky roof. No, I'm just kidding. Marty
Oh my
McFadden from
god.
podjam.tv. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Stephen.
The
Yes,
the
it's
joys of home
fun being a
ownership, right?
homeowner. Oh yeah, the joys, that's for sure.
Hey, listen, I had my fair share the end of last week, and this week I was mowing the grass last night, and the emergency brake cable broke for the second time.
Ooh,
So yeah, so I had to jerry rig that to finish the grass, and then order it and put the new part. Yeah, so I feel you. I feel you. I do.
yes.
Also, we've got with us Mr. Jeffrey Fitzgerald from JeffandHighDef.tv. Welcome.
Hey, hey, team, what's up?
Hey, no homeowner repairs for you this week. You're in good shape.
No, but I got to tell you, hearing that the brake line on your machine there broke twice, that's beginning to sound like a Dateline mystery to me. It's one of those things
Dateline
where, and then he tried to mow the lawn a third time. So it's like, yeah,
They'll tell you there's nothing wrong, even though it's breaking in the exact same spot. There's nothing wrong with it. Just stick it on. It's not hard to install. It's really not. It takes like 20 minutes, but it's just the fact that you do it. I say it's not hard to put on, but if you look at my arm here, and all the scratches and gouges that are on my arm here, yeah, it's a bit fun.
oh my gosh.
Today we're talking about something that these guys, Marty and Jeff, specialize in, because these guys have been involved in TV for most of their adult careers. Marty with ESPN, and then Jeff as an on-screen talent. So today we wanted to kind of talk about um, rhythm. Most people thought, well, maybe they're doing a show about music in broadcasting, but that's not the case. And Jeff, I want to kind of toss it to you and let you kind of lead in on this and let everybody know
Sure.
what is rhythm? What is the direction? Why are we talking about this?
Well, actually, Steve, I think, you had a good idea there. Maybe we could do a show like Dancing with the Streamers or something in January. We'll have a whole new season. But You know, rhythm and pace are two things that I think have really not had enough attention in the world of live streaming. Everyone talks about the big shiny cameras, getting the right ring lights, getting the right microphone, and that's about the extent that we go on the technology side with most beginners. But very few people really think about the intentionality and planning about, what do you do with your show? And then if you do plan, there's not a lot of thinking in terms of how you want to segment it and develop a style and a rhythm. And so there's 5 points today that we've come up with, and I know I have some graphics for you. And if you want to just you can lead on that and put those up, Steve. I just want to begin by saying that every show has a rhythm, and that rhythm is either going to attract your audience or it's going to repel your audience. And it's one of these situations where rhythm is it's something that may sound like it's an abstract word. And Steve, I tell you what, do me a favor before we start here. Go to the third slide, because I think that description might be a little bit easier for everyone in the framework of what we're talking about here. Rhythm is the cadence of the content and the flow of what your style is going to look like. It's really the all of the inner workings of your weekly segments, your man on the street interviews, how you want to introduce your show, that teaser hook, everything from how you want to say hello to everybody. It's really building that audience expectation and the flow of what you're doing and the style of what your show looks like, and then that pace. That's really a little different. What that is really just how fast or slow you're going to deliver that to your audience. And so there's a really good example that I like to use. And it's, when I talk to people a lot of times, it's the difference between NPR and CNN. And Marty, I know you very easily understand where we're coming from with this. These two are very different in terms of their rhythm and their style. NPR acts like they've got all day, that you're there for coffee and then you're going to go out and take a hike afterward. And it's like, so Steve, tell me about the time you were 12, right? But CNN on the other side of that spectrum is all about getting to the story where that story really starts, not so much the backstory. And so it's very much, hey, Thanks for joining us here in the 3 o'clock hour. At this point, we're looking at the president coming off the airplane. These are the things you need to know going into this afternoon. Two very different styles, two very different rhythms there, and the pace is also different, right? One is very conversational, and the other one is very much let's get to a point. And these things really apply even at our level. And it's one of these things where if you're not careful, you'll overthink it or underthink it. But if you can come up with a rhythm that's all you in a pace that really works for your audience, you're hitting home runs every time you get on the air.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to what you're saying, Jeff, I think it nailed it right there. The rhythm and pace, the difference is another way to look at it is rhythm is all about the content, what you're actually covering and your style. And then the pacing is more technical, more how you're speaking and practice. It's almost, and I look at it as two P's: preparation and practice. So
Mm,
the rhythm is more about preparation. You're preparing like you were mentioning your show rundown, your rhythm, how you're going to present the show. The difference between CNN and NPR content and is the difference in their rundowns as far as the topics that they're going to cover and how they cover it. NPR is much more conversational, much more long form. CNN's, like you said, quick hitting, breaking news. You see those graphics, you see those things. It's all about getting to the story quickly, getting the information quickly. And that you also see it in the graphics they use on the screen. CNN is very graphics intensive, like all cable news. They're presenting a ton of information coming at you like a fire hose, and they're just getting it to you as quickly as possible. NPR is more like telling a story, even though CNN can tell a story, especially in some of the opinion programming that they might have. But NPR is much more about telling the story. It might be around an interview, might be someone telling a story as far as what they do and bring context to it. And then the pacing is much more technical, where that requires practice. So it's like we talk about it in past shows where you practice your pace and get rid of crutch words, for instance, like ums and uhs and you knows and all that stuff. You hear that in podcasting, especially or online, especially when people are just getting used to presenting themselves either on video or audio. They a lot of the crutch words, and that's pacing, or they speak too fast, and they don't slow down, and that's another thing where maybe they're nervous, and you tend to want to get everything out, and your pacing's too quick. I mean, they talk like this, and you got to get it out, and it doesn't sound very good. And then you gotta practice, right? So it's more technical, so it just takes practice on playing a musical instrument. You practice and you pace and all that stuff. So I think those are really good 2 very important elements to a show that you have to think about. Both require practice, but one is much more preparation and one is much more the practice and the technical part.
yeah, Steve, go ahead.
Well, what I was gonna say was, we sit here and we do this show, and we have a little bit of a flow, a cadence, and these guys kind of have learned my rhythm, right? So I don't usually linger on shots very long, 3 to 5 seconds, unless like Jeff was just doing an opening dialogue. We're giving Jeff the floor. We're not going to sit there and switch and make you go crazy because he's trying to deliver a point. Just like now, I'm delivering a point. You don't see massive switching going on. But when I want to get their reaction to what I'm saying, or I want you to see the reaction of what they're saying, I might go to a 3 box, or if it's a more personable account, like when Jeff's addressing Marty a lot of times, or he's addressing me, what I'll do is, and I'm going to do it for this show just to show it, I'll put them in a 2 box to where it makes it more intimate between them two and the audience, where I'm not really involved in that particular discussion at that current moment in time. And it really helps tell a story as you're going. And what it does is those people that are off camera gives them a chance to grab a drink if they're coughing, or look at messages in a chat room. But keeping things moving rather than staying on a static shot for a long period of time has been something, at least in my opinion, has seemed to be very, very successful as far
Oh
as
yeah.
fun, I guess, for people to watch. Is that true? Is that what they're trying to look for, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the style of the show that we've been developing. It's been happening very organically, and that fits what we're doing. And it's really important to also say that the example you're talking about here is perfect for what a team, 3 people on screen is all about. If you're a single entity and you want the same kind of a relief where you feel like you want to look at a note or something along those lines, that's where you can build media content that you can play into your show for 30 seconds or a minute. And there are great ways of doing that with tools like Wirecast and others, where you can actually play a piece of media and that gives you a little 30-second downtime in the midst of your half-hour live stream. And you can, take that sip. Okay, this is where I'm going to go next. But Marty really said it very nicely. The biggest thing that will make this work is just being familiar with your content and practicing. And practicing doesn't always mean being in front of the lights and camera and you're doing it like, what we're doing live now. It could be sitting, at your desk at night, after work and your, kids are gone to bed and you're just looking at your notes going, okay, so this is how I really want to open this up. And I think this is a really cool question to lead off with the person I want to have on my show and see what their perspective is. And then as a host, one of the bigger things you have to pay attention to is how to drive that conversation. If it's the NPR model, they talk for the majority of that, and you really are more the insightful Larry King going, really? So how did it really feel when you actually found out that your son was coming back from the army? And in the CNN world, it might be where you've only got a finite amount of time. If you're doing a 15-minute show, it's really important to help your audience get to the real beefy part of what is valuable to them. And if you've got somebody that wants to start off with talking about more extraneous things, there's no disrespect there. You certainly listen to that, but you can easily navigate those things back to say, well, that's great that you've obviously spoken to 10 years experience there. How does that experience today play into what we're talking about with this particular topic or product? What are the big takeaways if someone didn't have that experience? Where are the pitfalls? And now what you've done is you've navigated something that was very big down into a focal point, and then you give them back the floor and you let them speak, and hopefully things go the way you want them to.
I think that's a big
Yeah,
problem, Marty. I want you to kind of touch on this because I know you're going where you're going. I
mhm.
think that too many times you and I we've been on shows where you get that one person, and maybe Jeff, you've seen this too, but that you get that one person that feels like they have to be heard the whole show, the whole
Hmm.
show. I mean, like you just you need a mute button for that person, right? I mean, talk a little bit about that, and from your experience.
Yeah, that's where the chemistry comes in, big time, and, that takes time to develop, and depending if you're doing a show, especially if you're doing a show with multiple hosts or multiple participants on a regular basis, that's something you're gonna develop over time. It also depends on how well you know that person, to develop that chemistry. I do wanna go back a little bit on, Stephen, what you're demonstrating with switching. That's kind of a 3rd ingredient here, and that's kind of an advanced part where you're not only the one of the hosts of the show, but you're also switching the show, and you do it in such a fluid motion, and you're saying that you've developed this flow over a period of time just from practicing it, and you're doing it very deliberately as far as switching the purpose of switching those shots is to keep it visually interesting and to kind of jar people. You see this on YouTube videos all the time where it's either a jump cut or lots of times, especially more seasoned YouTubers, you look at their editing style, they're just constantly switching side. That's just kind of jar you and make sure that you're still awake and make sure that you're paying attention. And what you're doing there also at a very high level is you're also switching the show, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do. So I would say that that part of, putting on a show and getting sophisticated with switching, especially if you're using software, probably comes 3rd as far as your advancement there. I think that, getting your flow down as far as what your show is all about and the style of the show and the flow that you want to do, that's where again where the preparation comes in, the pacing, you practice your presentation. Even if you're just say if you just have one camera like this, say if your whole show was just this one shot, this is where, again, the pacing comes in. This is where, you get that down. And then Steven knows how we all know how Steven's how he switches the show. And when we know that those shots changes are coming, and when he goes to that 2 box and 3 box, and like if Jeff and I are, we discuss this before the show. So we know that Jeff and I are going to discuss this and you're going to introduce a topic. So you're going to have that 2 box set up. We know what's coming. There's a pacing, get used to it. So it all it's a real feel that you develop over time. But yeah, I would say those 3 things, your content in your show first, concentrate on that. That's where prep comes in. Practice presenting yourself on camera, the pacing that we're talking about. And then Stephen, what you're doing with the switching of the shots, especially if you have multiple guests, that's gonna come last. That takes a lot of work to get really right.
And I think Jeff, you have a few other topics you want to get into with the along these lines with going this direction for pacing and understanding your rhythm.
Yeah, one of the folks that I really enjoy watching is Sean Cannell, who's obviously one of the mega stars on YouTube. Does an incredible job teaching millions of people how to do video the right way, and I love the fact that he's got a whole vibe down just in how he speaks to the camera. Who uses his hands to communicate thinking nonverbally. Nonverbal communication is probably the single biggest thing I think people miss, and it goes everything from and you'll see this on some of the timelines if you pay a lot of attention. I mean, we saw back in the days of Blab and other live stream platforms, you'll have the organizational coach or the success coach that's going to help you get your life organized, preaching from a dining room full of boxes and dim light, and it's like those two things don't really go together because they say something even when they're not really saying anything with words. And so pictures mean something. And so one of the things with nonverbal is to really assess what you're trying to communicate with all four corners of your screen. Do you want to have a little graphic in the bottom right corner? What should it say? You can have a hashtag on the screen. What should that background really involve? Is it something that you want to communicate more of a mobile background and you're doing things from the streets of New York, or do you want kind of what our particular style that we like which is more the traditional studio look with the bigger lights and the bigger look and the TV monitors and things like that. But all these things are part of your style and they begin to be part of your rhythm. And that rhythm is not just those nonverbals, as we've said. It really comes into introducing, like I said, if you want to have segments within your 15 or 20-minute show, first 5 minutes is your first guest. Maybe you go to a 30-second question of the week that you pre-ask and you've got that question coming in, or maybe it's a poll that you do live in your live stream, or then it might be going to a man on the street interview and saying, "Well, what do you all think about this particular thing? The election's coming up. What's important to you?" And so there's a million ways that people can do it. And I said this back. Great guy Ross Brand has a prediction every year, and I was honored to be part of that this year. And I said this is the year that I think that live streamers are going to really begin to understand that it's the produced type of content like that that's really going to start being more meaningful. And that's what's happening, is that we see people every day really figuring out that they can do kind of what TV does, because while the look may be different to some degree, the content can be very similar. And it's really just intentional planning, being comfortable in front of a camera and knowing what you want to communicate, and then doing that strategic, finding the right guest, finding the right look for you, and growing it, just doing it over and over, because repetition is the key to consistency and the key to really building a brand there. So
I think there's a lot of differences that people they try to mimic, right? They try to mimic other shows they see that like, hey, I want to switch like these guys on social, or I want to set up my show like the guys on social are doing, or whatever show each of us do individually. I want to do that. But Jeff, you kind of have like a tip about that, about kind of staying, personable and designing your show. Do you want to kind of get into that?
hey, you want to show that?
I absolutely can.
Yeah, so this is really the big takeaway. Design your show in a framework that creates an audience expectation. And also, along with that, ensure that there is a mix of the predictable with the surprising and new. And so it almost sounds like a yin and yang kind of thing. When in reality, setting that framework means that every week people know what to expect when they come to watch you. Whether it's how you ask for, put a 5 in the chat if this is something that's meaningful to you. I love the way Owen video. By the way, shout out to Owen. Hope you feel better. It's one of these things where he'll put out something and then give the poof, the high five. There's things that make you you that nobody else are like you. That's great branding. That's great style. It's great rhythm, and it's the pace that they've developed. And really, it's just becoming yourself in a way that people can expect. And again, we keep talking a lot about live shows, that we're all doing. 90% of them are what we are right now. They're all talking head. And what I'm proposing is you've got this great phone that's got 4K video on it. Go out before your show a couple days early, record some things that are meaningful, bring your audience to the show, not tell portion of what video can look like, show them what that particular thing is that's important to you, and then let them have a conversation about it. And that's building more of a rhythm and a style there. And then the pace is just, do you want to do it really fast or do you want to do it in a more story form, like Marty said? And all these little things in aggregate really build a great, great story and a great show.
And that's something I know, Marty. You and I we've talked about when you're going on location to bring that element to the show to kind of go along with what Jeff was saying here. When people can't be out there where you're at, they can come here and they could see it. Even if you're not live, we can add it into the show into the recording.
Exactly, and I love how Jeff presented that it's sort of like a dichotomy between you're saying, well, you want to be familiar, but you also want to stick in some surprise. It sounds like it's like, well, which is it? It's actually
Right.
both, and I couldn't agree more. I know exactly what you're talking about. Maybe a good way to think of a good non-broadcasting way to think about it is, since I'm having issues with my roof, and we'll do this like a construction analogy here, but think about your house, and you want to have a nice solid foundation to your house. It's familiar. The structure, the main structure is always going to be the same, nice and tight and familiar and strong, and you're familiar with it and you can trust it. So when you go to your house, you know it's not going to fall down. It's there. But then you have some holidays, right? So Halloween's coming up. You throw up some Halloween decorations. That's kind of a surprise. That's kind of a temporary thing. And the next holiday come, you may decorate your house a little differently. Seasons come around. You might have some things you do differently during the summer with your house. You might have some picnic tables out, and you might bring them in, some other things you do around the house depending on the season, and that's something different. So think of it that way, where people do like familiarity.
Mm.
So having that structure to the show does add a lot. So they want to, like, I think you brought up where people kind of have their trademark moves, or something, maybe a trademark graphic or a
Yeah.
logo or something, maybe a saying that they do, or a segment. And I think you brought up also where that rundown is important, where maybe you have different segments to your show, and and to make it fun, and people expect that, and they kind of get into it, and they kind of come in with you, and then you throw in some surprises. It might even be an interview section. You may have multiple sections to your show, and one of the main sections might you be an interview that you do, and that's going to be different every time. You bring in a different person every time, and that's where the surprise comes in. But then you have some familiar segments as bookends, and some people know that how you present yourself, or maybe a tagline or something like that. You see this a lot with YouTubers, and you kind of get brought into the community that way. And that does take, and again, having patience with that does take time to develop, but it's both work together, that air of familiarity and then the surprise as well. And I think that can really make for a nice show. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, we're a great example of what it's like to have people to do it with. Collaboration is really the key to all of this, I think. And so if you have trouble figuring out what you want to do with your show, or what that style looks like, or how do you introduce something surprising, get other people involved, build a little team and build a show as a collaborative body, and you'll come up with more ideas than you can even do, and it'll come together, I think.
Absolutely. And you had one other point that I want to make sure, because these are all really good. I want to make sure people have these points, because these are huge, huge points that they can take away from your experience, Marty's experience in learning rhythm. I kind of learned it by accident. I just kind of started doing it, and Marty kind of made me aware of, like, you've got the pacing, you've learned how to have rhythm. So I didn't really it wasn't something that I sought out to learn. It was just something that, like you said, watching CNN, I watched how those hosts handled their guests, how they interviewed, the
Right.
style. I watched talk shows, and like Marty alluded to earlier, I didn't sit there and go, "So what do you think you should do?" And start going really fast. I learned how to pace myself, and also from doing radio, even on the small stations that I was on, I learned how to be intricate with my words, so that way,
Right.
and descriptive, so that people listening could understand. I didn't just say, "Oh, it's just sitting over there." I learned how to do that, and that's something that people don't realize, that even people listening to this in audio form eventually,
That's right.
w- that's something you have to take into consideration with your rhythm and planning, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny you talk about radio. Radio, the saying in radio is to paint with your words, because you
Yep.
think about it, I think some of the hardest jobs are being like football sportscasters, because you're trying to describe everything that's going on with 22 guys in one football, but it can be done in a way that's more exciting sometimes than watching TV. And so every bit of these things, again, it's the small parts of these sum totaled that create a whole experience for whoever your audience is, and you'll know whether or not they are, reacting to it because you're going to attract them. You're going to see that kind of response, or you'll know you need to make some changes in things. But we got one more
Yep.
on the graphics.
Before we get to that, Jeff, I want to ask Marty something real quick because you did a lot of sports broadcasting with ESPN, and I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about this. Have you ever had a broadcaster go or talent? We'll say talent. You don't even have to give any names. That was a really good talent, but could not deliver sports content. Come up with a rhythm. Come up with just he was just pitiful to be on camera. It was just somebody that you would just be like, oh, we got to get somebody else on camera. Did you ever experience that? I mean, he was a good broadcaster. You could put him in with Walter Cronkite and he'd be perfect.
I never really experienced that because I was more on the production operations side where I wasn't on the editorial side, so I wouldn't make those decisions. But I've watched a lot of talent, do their thing. And for me, it was more about it's more about subjective opinion as far as what who can handle what. So I probably wouldn't be the person that answered that
Okay.
directly, but I'm sure that happens,
Yeah.
and
It
people
does.
fit different styles different ways, and yeah, I mean with especially ESPN, a lot of it is opinion broadcasting. A lot of it is who do you think's going to win, and I mean
But there are those
it really it's
broadcasters.
just yeah, it's just personal it's really personal taste. I mean, there are people that are better at like, for example, play-by-play versus analysis. There are certainly people that are broadcasters are way better doing the play-by-play. That takes a different set of skills versus being an analyst. Like, I'll give you an example, the non-ESPN, like, back in the day when John Madden was doing, football on CBS,
Hmm.
John Madden and Pat Summerall.
Hmm.
You remember that team, folks old
Oh
enough to
yeah.
remember that. Pat Summerall was a play-by-play guy. He knew when to stay quiet. He knew when to let the scene play out. In fact, who's the LA Dodgers, the older broadcaster, very famous. He's
Vin
another one
Scully.
that lets
I
it
may be
play out.
wrong.
What was that?
Vin Scully. I might be
Vin
wrong on
Scully.
that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. No, you're right. But he's another example, right? He's recently he retired. But those guys, those play-by-play guys that are really good, they know how to let a scene breathe. And they're almost
Mm.
better at speaking fewer words than too many words. Analysts know how to punch in with facts. No, like John Madden was great,
Oh
very
yeah.
entertaining. He was like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
that's why they call it the color guy. He had a color, he had an atmosphere, you know, and that's a whole different set of skills.
Well, Dick
So,
Vitale was like that with college basketball because he always
oh
kept you.
yes,
If anybody ever watched any of the games that Dick Vitale did, he was just like John Madden, but in the college basketball
yes.
realm, he kept it entertaining. So I see what you're saying there. It's
Yeah, and I think if you're a producer of content, right, and you're in charge of talent, maybe you're behind the scenes and you're part of a larger team. That's one of the keys to a good producer is talent evaluation, putting people in where they shine. I mean, you're gonna have folks that are just better at certain aspects. So you brought up the sports thing. When you're calling a sport, a sporting event, you usually have the play by play, and that's facts and knowing well let a scene breathe, and then versus adding the color, adding the analysis, and two very different set of skills. Same thing on a talk show. I mean, you could have a main host and then a co-host, and finding where you fit in, is key. And even what we do here, guys, with the three of us, a lot of it is, I would look at is restraint. Like you, Stephen, you brought up like, you don't want to be the person that talks too much. You got to know when to lay back, and I think we kind of play off each other nicely. We all have our turn, and we be quiet and let the other person speak, and then you kind of direct. You're kind of the orchestra, conductor. You conduct the
Mhm.
whole thing between the three of us, so
And now, Jeff, we're gonna. I didn't want you to cut off, but I thought that was really
Oh, you
important
didn't.
because I think that people need to understand the differences in different realms of broadcasting. Take different styles, different cadences, different rhythms, and
That's
so
right. Yeah, yeah, and what Marty said was so true because just the sportscaster analysis there, you can learn everything you need to know about how to put together something really meaningful by watching TV every day. The people who are
Mhm.
on there get paid to put together content that people are going to watch. That's what they do. And no matter what we say in the world of live streaming, that it's going to replace TV or that somehow we're going to move to this YouTube model where everything is more low ball, that kind of thing. Those things are true in certain places. But across the board, if you're looking for story and for the way it's communicated in a way that people ingest, TV is the one that figured that out long ago, long before we were all ever born. And you can learn a lot from it just by paying attention to it and then applying some of those things that you see and experiment with your show. Do some things along those lines. And Steve, do we have one more
We
graphic?
do. We do. I'm gonna pull that up right now.
This is the biggest one that I think all of us agree on, and this is what I think you really need to think about, as to how to approach all this. This is not, graduate class college here. It really comes down to intentionality is going to be the key to establishing your rhythm, and what that means is that you just pay attention to what you're trying to do. Sit down, get some time away from the camera, decide how you want to put together the video that you want to go out, how you want that audio to sound. Do you want opening music? Do you want credits at the end? Do you want to give shout outs that come in from a sidebar? And if it's not all the fancy graphics, maybe it's I want to start with a story about this meal that's been in our neighborhood forever, and then you want to bring in the person that maybe was the one that their parents were the ones that founded it, and then you want to do a walkthrough of it, and it's a really begin a process of beginning to figure out how you want to tell your stories in a way that are in what I would call bite-sized pieces, like what Marty was talking about. But intentionality is where it all starts because if you don't think about it and you basically just get on and casually do it, that works for a lot of people many, many times. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's different than trying to figure out who you are in terms of your nonverbal brand and what you're really trying to communicate across the board in every one of these areas that really, again, at the end of the day, make this whole package of who you are and how you're coming across to your audience.
I think that's really I think that's really interesting because like you said, some people can just do ad hoc, go off the cuff, they can just make it work. But I also think that if you're a good broadcaster, you're going to draw people in, right? And
Right.
people are going to grow with you. So having that intentionality is key. But even this show, right? There's people that watch it because they like you. There's people that watch it because they like Marty. There's people that watch it because they like me. There might be people that don't like me, but they're watching it because they like you guys. And I think there's something to that when you build a show with different personalities because there's always that personality that you love to hate in anything. I mean, think of Simon Cowell on when they did American Idol,
That's
right?
right.
He was the most
Mhm.
knowledgeable person and probably was right 99.9% of the time, but people didn't like him because he was just very, very in your face about it,
Yep.
But you have to respect the man for his talents, and I think that comes true for a lot of broadcasts. You watch a lot of different broadcasts, you're like, I don't like this guy, but I can respect his talent. I think that's true here
Yeah,
with
of
a lot
course.
of this.
Yeah, what's funny about Simon Cowell is that if you notice, the people on the stage, all while they appreciated what every judge said, it was really what Simon
Yep.
said that mattered.
Yes.
And so that speaks to something even in and of itself. But yeah, no, I mean, you're totally right about that. Personality is everything. If you can get on and just be the person that that God made you to be, let that sunshine out, be the inspiration that you want to be around the people. You're spreading positivity without necessarily having to go around saying, "Hey, I'm spreading positivity." People like to see somebody who's actually excited about life because we all know the world we live in. It's social media has kind of drowned it a little bit where we all think that everybody's doing better than we are and we're all kind of miserable in our digital mess at times and moments. So it's great to find somebody you can connect with every now and then on a live stream and say, "My gosh, look, they're doing something really cool," or "Hey, they've got a word for today that really speaks to my heart, and these are things that are important to me." And so, that's another whole topic for another show, which is using your live stream for a greater calling and a greater mission to really speak into people's lives. I'm a very big believer of speaking life into situations, and so that's what you could do with live streaming. You can come alive and bring people into your story and your message. And that will, in and of itself, be an incredible amount toward any show or rhythm or pace that you've got.
I think this is something that people don't realize out there. It's like we always come on here, we're always so chipper and positive. I mean, because that's how it is, right? You don't see TV personalities go out there and be doom and gloom, right? You have to set that aside. You got to go. Marty could come on here and be like, "My roof is leaking.
Ugh,
My roof
don't
is
get me
leaking." I
started.
could be sitting here going, My lawnmower broke the other day, and I had to fix it. It was brand new. I only bought it 4 months ago. It shouldn't break. And what kind of vibe does that throw off to everybody? It throws off
Yeah.
like, I don't want to watch these guys. These guys are all too, these guys are all. But you know what? We set all that aside. We come on here. We have a great time. And again, we are so thankful that Telestream allows us to come on here and do this and educate you guys on what we know. And in some cases, you're educating us. So it's great to have you guys here. But unfortunately, that's the end of today's show. We have to wrap that up. I still haven't found a nice, subtle way of doing that except kind of just rolling into it. But I know it's so hard to end these shows. We like to keep it a half an hour, and we know you guys got a busy day going on, so we don't want to tie up most of your day. But we'll be back next week. So a little bit of housekeeping really quick. Next week we have Paul Richards and Tess Protesta coming on from Stream Geeks. They're going to come on and talk about their Stream Geeks Summit that's coming up November 8th, I believe, in New York City. They're also going to talk about the PTZ Optics cameras that they have, the new PTZ Optics webcam. And I know, Marty, before we go, the consensus is so far we're really liking the PTZ Optics cameras so far over the Lumens. Nothing against Lumens, but so far, the testing that we've been doing
Yep.
kind of points that way. Still some time to play,
Yeah,
though.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm running the first generation PTZ optics camera for this main shot I have here, to getting my lumens dialed in, but we're more to come on that on the
Yes.
comparison there. Um, I will say that hopefully I'll be here for the next show, but I won't be in the studio. I'll be on the road, and hopefully more on that. Hopefully I'll be able to come in and with some surprises, or if not next week, the week after. But if I join the show, Stephen, will be from a undisclosed location at
Awesome.
this
We
point.
always like stuff like that.
So,
So if not, maybe we'll see if we can get some footage ahead of time and put it on the show so you guys can kind
yep.
of see what he's up to. But that's next week. Paul Richards, PTZ Optics, and in the following week we have one of our colleagues here at Telestream, Sean Zerly, and she's going to come on and talk about marketing side of things with broadcasting, how you can market your content, your videos, your pictures, things like that. We're going to really dig into some of that. That's in 2 weeks. So really cool stuff coming in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. Jeff, I didn't forget about you. Thank you so much for coming on, Jeff in highdef.tv.
Hey, it's always awesome to be with my buds. It's a great time, and I look forward to it every week.
Well, I'm looking at the chat room as we're going here, and Brad, one of our chat room moderators, he's like, the show needs to be an hour. I'm just saying, as much as we would like to do that, I think the consensus has been if we keep it a half an hour, we can pack a lot of punch into a half an hour. Maybe that'll change eventually, but for right now, we're kind of pushing 38 minutes right now. So, um, it is what it is right now, folks. But keep those comments coming. Keep the suggestions for the show coming. Get your videos submitted. I had a few guys this week tell me that they were going to send me videos, and I've yet to receive them. So if you're watching this, I'm eyeing you. Get it out to me. We want to show it here on the show. So for the next 2 weeks, we won't be showing any workflows because of the content that we're going to be bringing with the guests. But in 2 weeks, we'd like to show that. I know Marty's going to be showing some stuff. So get that out to us so we can have it planned and get it inside the show for the next couple of weeks. But guys, really appreciate it. We had a lot of fun today, and we hope you took something away from this, and we'll see you next time on social.